They are very near the front of the queue, so they are very keen indeed to see what is said. Well, just before we spoke to those two young voters there, we were listening to David Cameron, who'd come out of number 10 and made a statement, 5-minute or so statement to journalists there, particularly talking about these being dangerous times, talking about, as he sees it, Britain is much safer within Europe, and reminding voters that the decision that is made on Thursday in the ballot box is irreversible. He said there will be no going back. And you will know, I'm sure, if you've been following all of this morning, that his former advisor, one of his former advisors, Steve Hilton, has been talking a lot about this referendum this morning. He had a lot to say, particularly in relation to immigration figures. So let's talk to Steve Hilton now, who joins me from our studios in Westminster. Good afternoon, Steve Hilton. I'm not sure whether you were able to hear that statement just in the last few minutes from the Prime Minister, but what do you think broadly of those points? He was really clearly making the point that Britain, quite simply, is much safer inside Europe.
I did hear it, Jane. It was very interesting, actually, and rather an amazing thing to hear, because what you just saw from the Prime Minister was an admission that they've lost the economic argument, they've lost the argument on immigration, and so he's being wheeled out by rather panicky spin doctors, it seems to me, to try and change the subject. There was nothing new in what he said, and the argument overall is that we should be a self-governing country where the government that people in this country elect controls the things that matter to people's lives, and that's why we need to leave the EU, and that's the argument, I'm afraid, that they're losing, and that's why you saw that rather weird statement from the Prime Minister just now.
I mean, was he wheeled out, to use your phrase, precisely as a response to what you have been talking about, the fact that your contention is that he was told 4 years ago that the figure that he has put on migration simply is not achievable?
I think that's exactly right, because it goes to the heart of this argument. In the referendum campaign, we were told by government officials that as long as we're in the EU, it would be impossible for the elected government to meet the target that it had promised it would deliver to the British people. And that goes to the heart of the sense that if we don't leave the EU, you will never have a situation where the British government actually controls things like immigration and other economic issues like rules about employment and how we help businesses. All those things end up being a horse trading negotiation with 27 other countries. And that means that the government of the day can't actually deliver its promises.
So is the vote on Thursday, above and beyond anything else, is it about migration as you see it? Is that really, if we are being honest with ourselves as a nation, what this is going to be a vote about?
It's about who governs Britain. It's about who is in control of the things that we need to do to create jobs and boost living standards and build a better life for the people of this country. Who's in charge of that stuff? Is it the government that people elect in this country, or is it a group of unelected bureaucrats sitting somewhere else who end up initiating the policies that we have to put up with in this country, whether people want them or not? And I think if we believe in Britain and if we believe in democracy, then it's time to take control and leave the EU.
What's your view on the positivity or otherwise, though, that has characterised this campaign over all these months? The fact that there has been so much debate about precisely those issues you've just touched on, but there hasn't been a lot of talk of what you might call big picture. No one's been talking at any great length about what it means to be European, whether a British person wants to be European in the biggest sense. That it has come down to sort of nuts and bolts about numbers of who's coming in and who's going out.
Well, I think that one of the reasons that the Remain campaign have lost the economic argument is because no one believes their ludicrous scare stories. Now, you ask about a positive vision. That's exactly what I was arguing in what I said today about immigration. I believe that we need to be a global country that looks far beyond just Europe to the growing parts of the world like China and India, and actually welcome people from those countries to our shores who can start businesses here, who can create jobs here. That's when Britain does best, when we engage in the world, all the world, not just Europe that's right here. It's not about leaving Europe, it's about leaving this centralised bureaucratic institution called the EU. And that's why I think it's in the end about all of the issues, but fundamentally the one that underlies them is this notion of control and democracy, and how do we actually take control of our destiny so that we can engage in the world in a way that benefits everyone in this country.
And you worked very closely with David Cameron for quite a long time. Did you have these sort of conversations? Did you have that sort of debate when you were one of his advisors? Was this never a thorn between you?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think there's anyone at all who worked with me in government or before we entered government in 2010 that would be at all surprised by the things that I'm saying. I've always believed that the best way to create jobs, to boost living standards, to improve public services, to improve the lives of people, is to put power directly in their hands, to give people control over the things that matter to them. I wrote a whole book about that. Now, the EU is the direct opposite of that approach. It centralizes power. It takes decisions out of the hands of people, and it takes decisions out of the hands of the government that people elect. And that's why I don't think there'll be any question in number 10 or anywhere else that the things I'm saying are totally consistent with everything that I've always argued for throughout my time in politics.
All right, Steve Hilton, thanks very much indeed for joining us. Steve Hilton, former advisor to David Cameron.